Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Kaga. So, we're up to our usual World of Warships antics for your typical Tuesday on this channel. And I think I've been giving a little too much love to cruisers lately, so we're gonna have ourselves a Battleship replay. And I'm going to promise you now, this won't be the last Battleship replay that we're going to feature on the channel this week. Stay tuned tomorrow for a very unusual Wednesday edition of World of Warships. Well, wait a minute. What about War Thunder Wednesdays that you promised already? Well, that's not going anywhere either, so yeah, we're going to get a little bit of a double shot tomorrow. So look forward to that. And back onto this replay. So, yeah, you're going to notice the title. It's U-H-E and a ship named Tirpitz. Yeah, that's right. We're going to talk a little bit about the use of ammunition in the Tirpitz. And you're going to see me promptly have a love-hate relationship with the targeting system in World of Warships, as it decides that, yes, I really want to shoot that island and not the battleship behind the island. Alright, so you're going to typically find yourself in situations where your glorious guns on the Tirpitz will not penetrate a given target. And that's because the Tirpitz has these, well, they're relatively fast-flying shells, but they're about 380mm major caliber guns. They're not the kind of shells you would typically expect to deal a lot of damage to like enemy battleships, so this Citadel penetration against an enemy Montana was a bit of a surprise to me, honestly. I mean, granted, he was broadside onto me, but I just wasn't expecting it at that range. He was, you know, about, I want to say, like 19 kilometers out when those shells penetrated, so I was kind of expecting that with the higher velocity emphasis on the Tirpitz's shells for penetration value rather than the high mass, I was expecting that the distance would have bled off the kinetic energy that they would need to penetrate, and I was pleasantly surprised that they actually retained enough energy to penetrate the targets. But you can't always count on it, and that was probably a best case scenario for that shot. And I'll be honest, it probably a tad bit lucky too. So naturally it comes to mind that you're not always going to have that perfect shot. So how are we going to come up with means of dealing consistent damage, especially in these tier 10 matches that the Tirpitz finds itself in? And holy nuts, that's a lot of torpedoes. I think our friendly Shimakaze unleashed a full salvo there. Anyway, we're going to plant some more shells out there. See if we can get a repeat of that miracle shot while that Montana is still broadside onto us, but we don't anticipate his motions correctly, and those pass harmlessly past his bow. So, because the Tirpitz has these, they're, at least for a battleship, they're very fast-firing guns. They're reasonably accurate given the size of the targets you'll be engaging. I mean, 230-something meters of dispersion with the gunfire control modification 1 upgrade equipped that increases the accuracy of your guns, or aka reduces the dispersion value. It's given the size of the targets you'll actually be engaging, you still stand a fairly good chance of doing the good damage provided you're on more or less on mark with your aiming, and that's a torpedo spread from a Fubuki. Okay, good thing we only took one of them, but that's not going to leave us in a good position here with those enemy ships coming at us. Okay, back to what I was talking about the armor penetration and the dispersion. So you can stand a fairly good chance to hit your targets, but in the case that they're angled, good luck trying to penetrate your desired target with your shells with anything other than the occasional standard armor penetration hit, or in all likelihood, just spalling damage. That's the more likely outcome. So, well, how can we think about doing more consistent damage and being effective against these higher tier opponents who are, quite frankly, more armored than us? Or, in this case, destroyers. So, well, one way is certainly to load the HE like we did with this, against this destroyer. Looks like it's the Fubuki that we're engaging. Another thing is, if they're sufficiently close, we can always dish out the hurt with the torpedo launchings on either side of the ship that are in a 2x4 and launch the 4 533mm torpedoes this thing has to a side that do a fairly respectable 13,000 damage a head and travel that 6 kilometers at 64 knots. And it looks like we weren't quite able to pick up the kill on that Fubuki, and he's able to skirt off, but not before getting intercepted by an ally. So, those armored targets. I'd only happened to load the high explosive here because I was expecting to engage that Fubuki. I was not actually, at the time of this particular shot, planning to use this against that battleship because, you know, common wisdom dictates that battleships should keep the armor piercing loaded. But I have it loaded, and the Yamato, okay. In this instance, I'm never going to penetrate him from here. I'd have to get really, really uncomfortably close to ponder that penetrating. But it's good we've managed to get him on fire. I'm keeping the high explosive loaded because I know I'm not going to penetrate him. And in all likelihood, given the
Torpedoes, direct front.
and okay, that's the Shimakaze torp wall. Okay, and given the chance that the fire that these shells will set, being at this thing, these shells actually have a 34% chance to ignite a fire. I stand to do more damage to this Yamato firing high explosive at this distance with these guns, more so than I would if I was loading armor piercing. And the reason is that even if he was to use his damage control party, by the time the next volley hits him, that will be on cooldown. So, in time, and I stress over time, I will deal more damage to this Yamato with the high explosive than I would with the armor piercing. And it's not just because I'm doing the fire damage, is that if I'm hitting the superstructure of the Yamato, the high explosive will do more damage comparatively than spalling damage via armor piercing would. So it behooves us to actually take those shots in that respect, and as you can see, doing about 5,000 damage compared to about 3,000 and change, it does actually work. And I've found that especially in engaging a Yamato, lesser extent Izumos and awkwardly angled Montanas and Iowas, I will start actually be loading the high explosive now for dealing with those targets. And as someone who has dabbled in the battleships a little bit, just for reference, I do have up to the Nagato in the Japanese battleship line. I'm still kind of trying to grind my way through the lower tier US battleships. I know, right? But from what experience I do have, the one thing that just gets me depressed more than anything and affects my mental state when I'm playing is I've got the 2 or 3 fires on the deck. I will put it out with the damage control party, and the moment that goes back on cooldown, bam, fire. And then I have to burn my repair party too, because that's the best way to counter it at that point. except for when you know you're or have already used it and used both of them are now on cooldown. But get back to the match. We just nuked that cruiser who went broadside onto us. Never go full broadsides, people. Never go full broadsides, especially to something that can citadel penetrate you. That is bad. That is very, very bad. I know you have that common wisdom that you can cross the T and have an advantage, but remember, it is only a firepower advantage. It is not an absolute automatic win. And that's something you're going to have to remember, that yes, you are at your maximum firepower potential, but you are also at your weakest protection level. You exchange one for the other, and oh, damn, that's a fighter Essex loadout. Ow, ow, ow. At least I think that's an Essex. Could be an. Yeah, those look like prop planes to me, so I'm gonna say that's probably an Essex. Okay, so we're not doing too well here. Oh, picked up another citadel penetration. Yay! More damage before we die. Because even with the repair party going into action, we're dead here. There's just no way around it. And while I could have turned around, I don't think it would have been wise, because I probably would have just died going backwards, or died in the side like that shot there, the penetrations through the weak side armor, and have accomplished nothing. So again, and I know that there's that common adage of basically battleships should spam armor piercing, but I think there are times that you should consider using the high explosive, particularly against higher tier battleships than you. And you know, when you have that chance to reload against a destroyer because they didn't manage to kill you with that first salvo, I think in those instances it's okay to use high explosive. It's actually the proper choice in those instances. I suppose that's enough reviewing that particular gameplay, because I've sunk, and I suppose at the what's more important to you is that answering the question of, well, how did we do in that match? Well, considering we only got I think about 43 shell hits if we factor in the citadel penetrations, because remember, they factor them in differently. They're counted as different ribbons. And we ignited 3 fires, shot down 3 planes. And we did fairly well for ourselves. Little Lico, just about 425,000 credits earned. 6,100-ish experience out of that match. Did fairly well. Experiences, of course, with the daily multiplier and premium time. So let's get right down to it and answer the question of, well, how did we do? And for that, let's first look at how we did on the team list. So coming in at just a little over 2,000 experience for all that we did. And this is base experience, mind you. Base experience. The only ones that outdid us were our Montana and our team's Yamato, who respectively did very well this match, getting a total of 5 ships between them. Wow, that Montana really did a number on it, and it looks like that Yamato must have done a crap ton of damage. And yes, it was an Essex that we were facing off against this match. Oh boy, why do people run the air superiority Essex? I don't know. Air superiority carriers, as far as the American carriers are concerned, pretty much is not viable after the Ranger. They're just better builds for doing damage, winning games, and controlling the sky, from starting with the Lexington, especially the Essex, and up to the Midway as well. They're just better builds than the 302 configuration the Essex has. And I think the Midway also has that configuration as well, which I don't know why anybody would take it. Anyway, we did fairly well, and now let's see how we did in terms of damage, because, damage is what we worship in battleships, right? So, coming in at a little over 76,000 AP shell damage, a little under 20,000 HE shell damage, and 18,000 fire damage. We did fairly well this match, coming out to a grand total of 114,594 damage dealt to the enemy. Now, it is important to remember that we would not probably have denied ourselves that extra 18,000 damage worth of fire damage had we not used the high explosive, I believe against that Yamato in particular, because, I like free damage, especially against opponents who think they're angled against me and think that they're safe from pretty much all return fire. Ha 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 ha. So remember, fires are a viable tool when dealing with higher tier opponents, especially higher tier battleships. They do serve a purpose in your battleship lineup, and they can bring you more experience, more credits per battle if you use them wisely. Now, whether you should or should not kind of comes down to a bit of personal experience with the guns in question. There are some guns that probably don't need to fire a lick of high explosive just because the AP shells are sufficient for the targets you're dealing with. But only you will know that, and only experience will be your guide. This is just a little bit of a PSA to help awaken more people that this is viable and should be considered from time to time. So thank you for having bared with me for the better part of 17 minutes to this point. If you happen to like this video, please consider giving it a like down below. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please think about hitting that old subscribe button down below. Hope to see you around the channel a bit more often. As I promised earlier in the video, there will be more World of Warships content to come on this channel, to be followed up with by War Thunder content and some special World of Tanks and Armored Warfare content to come, because there are some new developments with respect to releases in Armored Warfare, and some interesting tanks that I haven't really touched upon on the channel yet. In particular, a particular offering from World of Tanks being the Panzer 58 Mutz. It is a particularly interesting tank, and I have a few thoughts on it and would like to share them with you all, so please look forward to that later on this week. So stay tuned, and once again, thank you, and good day.